When someone asks about your childhood, do you ever just freeze? You search for memories between the ages of 7 and 17, and you realize you somehow skipped about 15 chapters. The premature end of childhood rarely happens in some dramatic, movie-worthy moment. Often, it's much quieter. It looks like a 9-year-old making dinner while a parent works a double shift. It looks like becoming the designated translator during your parents' arguments, or learning how to read the emotional temperature of a room before you ever learn to read chapter books. This creates a strange paradox later in life. Today, you can probably handle massive, complex adult crises with your eyes closed. But the smallest things, asking someone for help, resting without feeling guilty, or just being carefree, feel almost dangerous. That hesitation comes from a lesson you learned very early on. You learned that the world does not stop for you, and the stability of your household depended entirely on your ability to hold it together. Your personal needs simply had to come second. Society routinely praises this behavior as exceptional maturity. In reality, it is an ongoing trauma response. You built an entire operating system to mask a child who never got the chance to be young. Psychologists have a specific term for this. It's called parentification. Dr. Lisa M. Hooper has spent years researching exactly what happens when a child takes on roles and responsibilities that should belong to adults. Her research reveals that this perceived maturity is a biological survival adaptation. The child's nervous system locks into crisis mode. Instead of returning to rest, that elevated hypervigilant state becomes the body's permanent default baseline. Operating at this frequency gives a kid what look like superpowers. You develop a hyper-empathy, where you can sense your parents' moods the second they walk through the door. You instantly spot irregular behavior and anticipate the needs of everyone around you before a single word is spoken. But those superpowers come with a heavy price. The survival skills you relied on at 8 years old crystallize into an inescapable operating system that dictates how you make decisions 20 years later. If you feel constantly anxious and exhausted today, you are not weak. You are experiencing the inevitable physical consequence of a body running a childhood crisis program well into adulthood. This operating system completely scrambles how you handle relationships. True intimacy requires letting your guard down, but when you grew up too fast, emotional vulnerability was a luxury you couldn't afford. Being exposed still triggers alarms. As a result, you might find yourself magnetically drawn to emotionally unavailable partners. It makes sense when you think about it. A dynamic where you give endlessly and receive almost nothing feels safe because it feels familiar. It replicates what home felt like. Conversely, when someone actually offers consistent, healthy love, it triggers anxiety. It feels oddly uncomfortable, leaving you constantly bracing yourself and waiting for the other shoe to drop. People might observe how you work and label you a perfectionist, or say you have a type A personality. Look closer. Running through 17 different scenarios before making a tiny decision is a primal attempt to control every variable. To a parentified child, unpredictability once meant danger, and chaos meant everything falling apart. The modern workforce actively rewards this specific trauma. Employers promote the hyperproductive, the entirely independent, the extremely low maintenance. We get things done without asking for anything in return. Yet all that adult success often feels completely hollow. No matter what you achieve, a persistent inner voice demands more, because your fundamental self-worth was inextricably tangled up with your usefulness to others a very long time ago. Along the way, you become completely fluent in the language of emotional labor. You manage the tension in a room the way a conductor leads an orchestra, automatically diffusing conflicts before anyone else even registers a problem. The isolating toll of this labor is immense. You can be standing in a room entirely surrounded by your closest friends and still feel profoundly alone. Nobody actually sees the massive internal effort you exert to keep everyone else comfortable. This leads to a chronic, bone-deep exhaustion that 8 hours of sleep simply cannot fix. It is a physiological symptom of decades spent in overdrive. Your body never learned what true rest feels like because resting was never safe. Asking those friends for help, or even just admitting you are tired, feels completely impossible. It feels like an identity failure, because your entire value was built on the premise that you would never need anyone. The first step to repairing this requires actively grieving. You have to mourn the messy, carefree childhood you were forced to skip. You have to grieve for the kid who should have been allowed to be irresponsible, needy, and protected. Mourning this loss is not an act of bitterness. It isn't ungrateful. It is an act of crucial psychological honesty. Then comes the hardest realization. Being needed to solve problems is entirely different from being valued as a human being. Your worth is not measured by what you produce, or how flawlessly you manage other people's emotions. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to step down from managing the world, let someone else hold the weight, and finally be a beginner at being taken care of. You have been holding on so tightly for so long. It is safe